we're here for the launch of Abeer Ameer's wonderful first collection, Inhale Exile. Here it is. I will do a little introduction for Abeer. She will read a few poems. We'll ask a couple of questions. We'll show some photographs, and then there'll be a little bit of a break about 20 minutes in. So here we are. Abeer Ameer was born in Sutherland and grew up in Cardiff in Wales. She originally trained as a dentist in London and completed her membership of the Royal College of Dental Surgeons in Edinburgh. She has an MSc in Conscious Sedation, in dentistry from Cardiff University, and developing an interest in treatment of anxious patients and patients with special needs. And her MSc dissertation investigated the potential use of mindfulness-based therapies in the management of dental anxiety. So she's got this fun medical background, as well as all her poetry activities, artistic activities. Her poems have appeared widely by now in print and online journals and anthologies, including Acumen, Poetry Wales, Planet, Magma, Red Poets, New Welsh Reader, Prole, The High Window, Atrium, The Rialto, and our friends at Long Poem Magazine. She was a recipient of the Literature Wales Mentoring Scheme in 2020, and she recently appeared at the Kendall Poetry Festival, where I think she got a few new fans, perhaps, who come along today. And also, just this morning, we heard that she was one of the finalists in the Dyslexia poetry competition. She's one of the runners-up in the wonderful Dyslexia competition. So another little flower for the wreath that is Abeer. Thank you so much. Now, please, Abeer, read some poems for us.
Oh, thank you so thank you so much, Amy, and thank you so much to everybody who's joined. I'm so excited. And I said I wasn't going to look at who's coming, but I'm so pleased. Thank you so much. So yes, Inhale Exile. So I'm going to read the first poem. It's not the first poem in the book, but it's kind of the central poem. The Reed Flute and I, after Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. As the reed flute sings, you weep your sorrow. Your heart still beats in the place you left. The weight of your yesterdays that were once tomorrows halves you, just like the day the reed was cut, pulled from its bed, carved to carry the breath of the carver, to ears held far. Its inhale is your exhale, as if straight from your own chest. Its wails redden your eyes. Its larynx speaks your exile. The same parting that split the reed from its bed brings you together, and you can't know until you've always known. When they said farewell, you bled so long, knowing you would not farewell, and still only long for the place your heart comes from. Reading in tongues, all music yearns for home. So the collection is basically based on stories I grew up with from my parents, and from when I visited Iraq as well, I heard lots of stories. So Iraq is in the news sometimes. It's known as Balad al-Rafidain, which means the land of two rivers. So rivers are really important, and I've mentioned them quite a few times in the book. The turmoil that has occurred in Iraq isn't just the start of this millennium. It's actually from a long time before. And this next poem details the sacking of Baghdad in 1258 CE. So it happens to be called Baghdad 1258 CE. Blood and ink met again at the Tigris. Mongols beheaded many. Abbasids lost their empire. That day, blood poured into the Tigris. turning it red, until the next day when it turned black from ink of books from the grand library, torn and dumped, rendering the river a black mulch of hadith, science, philosophy. Little did the Mongols know that someday soon the conquerors would themselves be conquered by the same black ink. Um, so one thing I love, apart from poetry, is photography. And photography is known as painting in light. And I've often wondered how one can paint in light when light is limited. So this is just such an example of that. It's called Photographer in Halabja, 17th of March, 1988. He shoots everything he sees before him. Families gathered in alleyways, birds fallen from their nests, that day in spring. In front of steps, the figure of a man rests, wearing Kurdish turban and baggy pants, a large sash wrapped around his waist, face down in the dirt, holding a baby in his arms. Muted, earthy tones around a pink blanket. A white, glowing face, chin up to the sky. The photographer holds his camera tight to capture this perfect still life of the just dead. Hands shake as he takes the parting shot. Newborn face towards the camera. This exposure burns his right index finger, his retina. He'll share what the world needs to see, though no image can show the pungent air, thick with sweet apple and bile. No shadow dark enough.
Thank you, Abeer. A couple of questions. You mentioned photography, but what is it about poetry that got you really involved with poetry?
There's quite a few reasons. I guess kind of always grown up with the love of language. I was quite good at Latin actually in school. My Arabic isn't as good as it should be, but I'm working on that. But I've always loved where words come from. The roots of words is just something that's really quite extraordinary. And in Arabic, words come from three letters. So, and every word that comes from the same three letters is somehow related to each other. So I always found that really fascinating. And then with poetry itself, part of it, I think, because of my surgeon roots, where I like, you can say so much in so little. Um,
but there's also like the superb history in Iraq of their epic poems.
Yes. Yeah, my grandfather actually, he was a big influence. I didn't spend enough time with my grandparents. I don't think you can ever really spend enough time with your grandparents, and I think that's across the board. It's not just because they were far away, but so he actually had his own poetry collection, but this was after he passed away, Allah yarhamah. So, and I always dreamt of kind of being able to read it and quote it. He grew up in a place where the greengrocer would recite poetry, and they'd have like poetry battles, friendly ones, but they were still the kind of the banter was poetry battles basically. So I really just like that. And also even in dentistry, actually, because I learned some hypnosis techniques. And so the power of words, just if you use one word as opposed to another, you can help a person be less anxious. That's just really amazing. So
really pretty relevant to like the tragic history of Iraq, especially in recent times as well, with Saddam and also in the Gulf War.
yes,
Sense of bringing peace to a situation that was very dark.
yes, I think speaking the truth is hand in hand with poetry. So yeah.
Yeah. Can we have some more poems now?
Yes. Okay, so this next one is called The Student. "15 now. He flies kites with combat strings of powdered glass to secure victory over Najaf rooftops. He breeds bulbuls, swims in a caustic soda pool, runs through cemeteries to be chased by rabid dogs. Thrill seeker with the zeal of youth, pompadour hairstyle, swagger like James Dean. He's a rebel without a cause until the cause finds him in 1963. A massacre he writes about in his school essay. His bloodline might have ended then in a pool of blood, but for a teacher risking his own bloodline by not informing on the student traitor. Returns the essay. See me after class. A quiet word with the boy's father of the hot acid their Iraqi Jimmy might land them in. For all their sakes, he's told to keep his head down a few more years. Soon enough, he'll leave Iraq, study pharmacy, listen to Engelbert Humperdinck, Tom Jones, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali. He'll hitchhike across Ireland with a friend from Hong Kong, sing Quando, Quando, Quando in a Bradford pub, work in a dairy in Halifax, drinking all the gold top he can, and learn very quickly never to give his real name. So one thing I was really kind of keen on making sure I did was to sing the song of unsung heroes. So I really wanted to celebrate all the as many as I could, but there are so many. So this is called The Teacher, and in the last poem, a teacher saved a boy's life, and then the following family, and so this is also a teacher. Parkinson's triad slows his movements, holds his pill-rolling fingers, his arms, in cogwheel rigidity. A tremor moves his head. He once saved a life by a movement of his head, a nod to his student on the 4 execution list to usher the fugitive out of the window before al-Mukhabarat came through the door. Soon he faced demands from Ba'athist Party officials to sign a paper confirming allegiance. Wallah, cut out my tongue if you must. Cut off my fingers one by one. On the run, like the student before him, bids farewell to those he knows, those he won't see again in this life. His voice is whisper soft now, his face masked not just by disease. He sits, prayer beads in his right hand, giving thanks for the movements of his head. In speech, only as-Sami', the all-hearing, can hear. Now for something slightly different. So I cannot confirm or deny whether this is a family member. This is called The Iraqi Bride in Transit. And it's not me, by the way. Yeah. She's 19, waits in Charles de Gaulle Airport, unsure where to go. She hopes that groom comes for her soon. Her first experience of a train journey hasn't been ooh la la. Far from her Baghdad home, her white suit is not so white now. It's the first time she wears high heels. She has blisters, struggles to balance. She wears her mother's fur coat, a white headscarf. White clutch bag holds her green passport. Feels bare without her abaya. Groom waits in Heathrow arrivals. It's the 23rd of December, 1974. 3 flights have arrived from Paris in the last 8 hours. No sign of her. Iraqi Christians who boarded the same plane from Baghdad, waiting for their New York flight, recognize she's the bride. Take her to the gate. Last flight before Christmas. He is pupil. He do drugs. She rolls her R's. Groom's lost hope. It's late. He gets up, ready to leave Heathrow, gathers coins to make the international call. What will he tell her father? Announcement. Groom is summoned to immigration. Your wife says you do drugs. He realizes at that moment he should have taught his bride the correct English term for pharmacy student.
Thank you. There's a little bit of comedy amidst some of the tragedy of your work. It's quite appealing in a way. Right. I think what we're going to do now, I think we have some visuals. We're going to show some of Abeer's photographs, and maybe you will talk us through them a bit.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Okay, so this is a place called Shara al-Mutanabbi, which is the street. This is the start. So this is where it starts. It's a road of al-Mutanabbi, basically, or Mutanabbi Street. Al-Mutanabbi was a very famous poet in the Abbasid era. I hope I'm not embarrassing myself with incorrect information. But yeah, and he was a very famous poet. So a lot of people quote him now, actually. So this road is known as the Booksellers Road. It's where all the booksellers kind of congregated, really. So if we go on to the next. Yeah, so this is a sculpture of Al-Mutanabbi. This is inside the bookshop of my uncle. So my grandfather had a bookshop on this road. This bookshop is actually in a different location, but his original bookshop, one of the memories I used to have anytime we went to Iraq, we would spend a day in Mutanabbi streets and visiting my grandfather. So this is where they kind of have them on the roads, especially on Fridays. You know, the roads are very full. So this is my very famous blue rucksack, modeled beautifully by my husband, who was walking in front. And actually, we normally it's much busier than this, but we went at midday in August in Iraq. So it was about 50 degrees, and everybody else had the sense to stay indoors. And that was when I was taking my pictures, and my lips were dry and everything. It was quite hot. So that's the same. And this final, this is a cafe, a well-known cafe on Al-Mutanabbi Street, and it's called Shah Bandar Cafe. And after the break, I'll read a poem. about that. So that's my own painted representation of Al-Mutanabbi Street. And those are palm trees that we'll probably put at the end. So, but those were taken, actually that photo was taken on the road between Najaf and Karbala.
Wonderful. Thank you, Abeer.
Yeah.
It's my dream now to go to Mutanabbi Street. It seems like a mecca for poets. I have to go there once in my life. It's fantastic. Thanks so much. I think, are we going to take a little bit of a couple minutes break here, 5-minute break? And then we'll be back to read more poems.
So before the break, we had some photos of Mutanabbi Street. So it's so this next event that the poem's about is actually, it felt really close to home, and it started getting closer to home. So on Monday, the 5th of March, 2007, there was quite a huge explosion on Mutanabbi Street. And so this is basically about that event. So this is called Black Car, Black Banner. Monday, 5th of March, year 2007, Al-Mutanabbi Street. Papers bound neat on pavement. Scholars' Ink District. Ala Bab Allah, they stand at God's threshold for some lawful bread. Sell books, pens, perfume. Market morning has broken. Callers and their wares. Leblebi, leblebi. Chickpeas with lemon. Sibah, sibah. Prayer beads. Recite the 99 names. Shabandar Cafe. 4 sons, 1 grandson. Black car passes. Explosion. Burning pages everywhere. He shuts his eyes forever. 30 dead, 100 hurt. Now, year 2008. Black banner, yellow writing. Charred bundles of paper gone. Shahbandar's Martyrs Cafe. Al-Fatiha. Al-Fatiha. So, yeah, Al-Fatiha is something, it's the opening chapter of the Quran, and it's said in every prayer each day, and it's recited for those who have passed away. So it's something that we often do, say Al-Fatiha for those that have passed away. So I've mentioned the rivers of Iraq quite a bit in the collection, as I said before. So I felt it's only appropriate to mention the diver as well. And this is based at a time, this poem is based on a time where sectarian violence really spiraled out of control, and it was just bad news every day we were getting. So it was very difficult. So the diver. It's no coincidence that he was born in March. Pisces, romantic who loves to swim. He's been called by the government for his services again. He keeps coming back, no matter how bad it gets. He loves the rivers and oceans. Despite no-go zones, barriers and metal nets, he can't help but return to the Tigris and marvel at how she can give and take, bend and curve, kiss the Euphrates at the marshes, cry at what they hold. Today he holds his breath in his hands, feels the skin-to-skin connection as he finds another body, this time with no head. He loosens it from the Tigris tangles. Baghdad 2007 has been difficult. The man with no head will be buried tomorrow in an unmarked grave if no family comes for him. Another lonely janaza prayer. Dragged up, it shows hands tied behind the bullet-ridden back. The diver will probably find the family or head downstream somewhere. The diver's own family wants to leave Iraq. They say he's a dreamer. Tell him there is no hope left. No point in holding his breath, hoping for peace. But he knows the Tigris has been black and red, seen much worse than this, yet forgives. Besides, he says, I can hold my breath for a very long time. So this next poem, before I say about this next poem, food is very important. Food unites us, I feel, and food also reminds us of home. And, I live in Cardiff, so on City Road, you can now get date syrup and you can get torshi nejef, which is Iraqi pickle that is really, really nice. But you can't get samoon bread. It's not the same. So samoon bread is a kind of flat bread, and it's just so nice with everything. You can eat everything with samoon bread. So this mentions samoon bread, and this poem is called The Baker. The baker kneads and comforts the dough to make this day's bread, pats it to a diamond eye, pinches both ends to shape this day's bread. Adhan calls to each mourner that they've been blessed by the God who is always greater, who gave this day's bread. Inner and outer Kanthi, dry of tears the baker sheds. She loved someone from his crushed airway, this day's bread. Dormant seed once breathed as wheat, died to give grains dust. His hands knock it back to rise again, this day's bread. His fingertips flatten each ball of dough, newborn soft. Palms lay each one to rest in burning clay, this day's bread. It puffs up like chests of angry men, is wrapped in white cloth to stay warm. Broken just like the breaker, it sighs steam of age, this day's bread. Opens to the oath of mint and holy basil. The baker knows it's perfumed with the nectar of each sealed fate, this day's bread.
Right. I think I only have one more question. You will have to improvise otherwise. Wales. Speak a little bit about Wales.
Wales.
How Wales feels to you and how it's helped you shape your vision.
Well, the 1st of March, 1988 was the day I was crowned the Bard of the Eisteddfod in Gladstone Primary School in Cathays. So I feel that, it's just perfect timing. That was my first brush with poetry success. Long may it rain. So yeah, I mean, I really love Wales. There's I've lived quite a few different places, not as many as some, but certainly I've always wanted to come back to Wales and Cardiff in particular. There's so many there is actually, when I heard the word hiraeth, which is not fully translatable, I understand, but it's it sounds like a very Iraqi word to me. Actually, it means the yearning for home. And when I heard that word first, I thought that is such an Iraqi word, but it's actually a Welsh word. And there's so much I feel that is in common with Iraq and Wales. Maybe I'm being a bit romantic, but you know, I do feel at home here, and actually, it's the first place that I was talking about this to my dad yesterday, and he said that Wales was the first place he really felt at home from Iraq. So Wales is very special to me. I love it.
What a wonderful story.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Have you got a couple more poems for us?
I do. Yes. So this next one now uh, is my most famous poem. It has been on the radio. It's very famous now. So it's actually been on Poetry Please, with thanks to Kim Moore who read it. So I read it actually, but Kim Moore presented it. So anyway, so this next poem I was actually going to call Hiraeth because it just reminded me so much of that word. But it's actually called Yet He Remembers Baghdad, after Edward Thomas. He has dementia, yet he remembers Baghdad. Hippocampus shrunken, he forgets other names. The time of his wife's final breath is engraved, yet he forgets who else went and who came. He folds tissues, he clears his throat. The aged epiglottis can't tell water from air. He saves newspapers and empty crisp packets. His hearing aid whistles as he sighs and stares. Ink on his fingers, he annotates photographs to remind himself and others of who he is. Writing his name on each black and white image, he forgets which of the 5 sons he lives with. He tightens a robe around his shadowed form, quoting Jawahari's lines, 2 rivers and blessed sands. As rain taps the window, he yearns for the dusty sky, where clocks tick loud, his own promised land. So this is my final poem. Thank you so much to everybody who joined today. I'm really just honored and so thrilled that you were here. Thank you. So this poem is based on a poem by Jawahari, who was a poet I mentioned in the last poem. He was a very famous Iraqi poet who died in exile in 1997. And he has some very famous, readily quotable lines. And this one's based on the lines Salamun ala hadabat al-Iraqi, which means peace be upon the hills of Iraq. So this is called The Love Letter, after Muhammad Mahdi al-Jawahari. Beloved stranger, upon your hills be peace, and your birds and your moons and 2 rivers. There is such deep sorrow in your song of praise, beneath your clays and earths, the bodies of lovers. Blessed are their tongues which spoke truth through pain, their dry throats, once filled with dust, now light. Gardens live their sweetness, feed each date and fig in God's names. Blessed be your reed beds and palm trees, your curves and marshes. Since the grief you tasted, may you breathe the healing salt. May goodness flow from you, be solace for those who seek. Blessed be your skins and inks. The wisdom prophets taught imbibe light through each leaf, each track, each breeze. Homeland, cradle, peace be upon you. Be whole, be honored, be open, be still. Peace for all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Abeer. That was
Thank
just
you.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll unmute everybody and let them clap, I think. Can we do that? Here's where I do the official nag to buy the book. My lovely colleague, Sarah, will put the link in the chat.